Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from the world of film, brought to you by The Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. Tonight, we have a real treat, a conversation with a filmmaker who's no stranger to the dark corners of the human psyche, Fabrice Du Welz. His latest film, Maldoror, is making waves, premiering at a competition at the 2024 Venice Film Festival. It's a gripping, intense ride, a story about a young Belgian cop on a desperate search for justice, all set against the backdrop of one of Belgium's most haunting scandals. We're talking about a series of kidnappings of young girls that shook the nation in the 90s, a time that left a deep scar on the Belgian soul. In our conversation, Du Welz talks about the challenges of revisiting such a traumatic chapter in his country's history and the catharsis of telling this story. We also delve into what draws him to these portrayals of evil, this time through the lens of a quest for justice. Is it a fascination with darkness, or perhaps a deeper need to understand what drives us toward and away from our own humanity? But folks, that's not all. As we often like to do, we're going to go back to his earliest memories of cinema, his beginnings in acting, his study of theatre, and how all of that shaped the filmmaker he is today. So fire up an Audio Teeny and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Hello, Fabrice. Welcome to the Showcast.
Hello. I'm pleased to be here.
I'm so thrilled to be getting to speak to you. I'm looking forward to chatting about your new film, Maldoror, which will soon premiere at the Venice Film Festival at the time of recording. But what I usually like to do for these podcasts, Fabrice, is I like to break that proverbial ice by asking a very, very simple question, but I'm always curious to find out. What is your earliest memory of cinema?
Well, I was raised in boarding school. So very small kid. I was 6. So I remember the Wednesday afternoon, we have the cinema experience, it's VHS, so we were allowed to see a lot of different comedy or Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris stuff, and I enjoy it tremendously. And immediately I said, a little voice in me said, well, one day you're going to be there, you're going to work there, because I was so impressed by those people enjoying their time, their life, making some funny stories and traveling, be surrounded by a beautiful woman. And, so I was projecting myself into that world very early.
Did you also have an idea of what kind of stories you'd like to tell eventually from that early age?
No, because I was too young, and at the beginning I was thinking to become an actor, and I studied theater, but I realized quite quickly that I'm not fit for that. I would prefer to be behind the camera. But at the beginning, no, I have no idea. But when I get a little bit older, I started very huge, and I'm still compulsively cinephile. I watch practically everything. So I have two lives. I have a life of myself. I like as a filmmaker, of course, but I'm always very interested by films and projects by others, director and also I ran a kind of a show in Brussels, that I invite in my apartment a different film director, international film director for a long chat. It's for catharsis Belgium, called BTV. So I'm always curious about cinema, always, yeah.
Yeah, I know about that show, and that's amazing, and it's great to hear that aside from passion for filmmaking, you also have a passion for movies, which is fantastic. I'm a cinephile myself, and I love to hear that. But you mentioned your background in theater. I mean, you studied theater. You actually said you had thought of initially becoming an actor. But just thinking about that, do you think that has shaped somehow your approach to directing movies?
Yeah, of course. It's very important for me to the place of the actor. The actor is central in my dispositif, it's very, very important. So I took a lot of time to pick the right actor in my films. Well, sometimes I'm wrong, but now getting older, I try to be a little bit more focused on that. And when I get the right actor, I try to make central in the dispositif and try to make easier his life. But I try to push him in his boundary. I try to push him in a very physical way. So I think my approach in cinema sometimes on the set, is very visceral and physical. And I work very, very close with the actors.
Watching a film like Maldoror, for example, I get that impression. I get that feeling, of course. And actually, let's start talking about it because, talking about the stories that you like to tell in your movies. How do you think this latest work of yours fits in within your evolution as a cinematic storyteller and, of course, as a filmmaker?
It's very a breaking point for me. Maldoror is a new horizon, trying to achieve something different than my previous films. Because it's based on a real story. It's based on something who owns Belgium for 30 years. I had 20 when the story happened in Belgium, and just like my camarade, just like the people, just like all the people around me, we were very shocked by that story. So I always in my mind the idea to one day to make a film about that. But the subject is so touchy in Belgium. So touchy, you can imagine how difficult it is even to talk about that, especially those days. So it demands me a lot of time and I think probably maturity to approach the right POV to articulate the story. And at the moment I had the idea of the young cop POV, I knew that I had my film. But it's been complicated to set up. It's been a big challenge because the subject is so touchy.
I'd love for you to get into that a bit more, but very briefly, just so that the listeners understand a little more. Maldoror is about an impulsive police recruit tasked with a secret mission to track a dangerous sex offender. But when the operation fails, he basically decides to take matters into his own hands and hunt down the culprit. I'm just keeping it basic because I don't want to give anything away. But you can tell, I'm sure the listeners will be able to tell, it's quite an intense story. You brought up the historical context of the film. Obviously, yeah, this is a very touchy, very dramatic moment in Belgian history. How much of the film, therefore, is actually based on true events? Or alternatively, what was the inspiration behind your pursuit of making a film that's based on this story?
Well, as you said, the story is based on a real story, and it's not a fait divers. For Belgium, it almost make Belgium collapse, the constitution. It's really a point where the people were in the street and in rage, very, very shocked by all that story, because there is many, many layers in that story. So first, when I get, as I told you, when I get the right, I hope the right POV, the right young cop POV, we made with my screenwriter, Domenico Laporta, we made an amount work of documentation, research, and we read a lot. And believe me, the story is so huge. There is so many stuff, and it touched every aspect of the society. At that moment, we tried to make a movie for the people, to have a kind of a catharsis way, to have a way out, because it's still not common in Belgium. In Belgium, you have a two-track. You have the isolated predator, and you have the network. And after the trial, Dutroux was found guilty, and he was the predator isolate was the right track. But if you know the story a little bit, and I'm not a complotist at all, but if you know the story and if you read the story and if you spend so much time like me into the file, that at least there is a small network, at least 3 persons. So there is many lies, many hidden files, many muddy lies. once again, I'm a filmmaker. I try to make cinema. And with Maldoror, I try to make a thriller, a cop thriller based on real event, and to find a way to reinvent something. And when I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino, I was so obsessed with that film. You know, I saw that film mostly 15 times in the theater. I was so obsessed with that film. I think it's a brilliant film, but I thought, well, that's the way you can do that. It's possible. You can reinvent the real story. You can put your vision based on a real story and reinvent the story. And it gives me the strength to rewrite the story, mostly at the end, of course, because the ending we propose in Maldoror is not the ending with the reality.
Well, one thing I think of when I think of, like, you know, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and other, you know, film directors as well and their works is cathartic. You know, their films tend to be cathartic. And so I take it from what you said that this was a cathartic process for you as well, working on this film.
Absolutely. It was really cathartic. And I I learned so much about the project because, you know, we shot in Charleroi. It's just like a Detroit place, you know. It's very damaged socially, economically, and morally. So I spent a lot of time there, and it's where the real story occurs in Charleroi. So I spent a lot of time there. I talked to a lot of people, and I realized at one point that the people are still, you know, under the influence of that story. They blame themselves. There is a shame, a sentiment of shame, you know, everywhere. And I try modestly, but I try really to make a catharsis, you know, to, in a way, with the tools of cinema, because once again, I'm a cineast, I'm not a politician. And with the tool of cinema, I can propose a catharsis. I can kill the villain. And it's not only kill the villain. It's also a reflection about, well, at least I try to make a reflection with the evil or bad. You know, what is evil? You know, Chartier, the young cop, comes from a very dark background. And he tried to elevate himself being a cop because he thought at the time, at the beginning of the film, he thought that being a cop can prevent him to be nasty or to be evil, and he tried to make something good for his life and for the others. And then he realized being a cop, it's muddy everywhere, corruption is everywhere, and he has to face that. At one point, when he faced the villain, when he faced Marcel Dedieu, the bad guy in the movie, he has a choice to make. And I was very interested by that idea, to what kind of choice you can make between that very difficult equation. I don't know how you say that in English.
Equation. Yeah. So you said so many things that I would love to dig deeper, because it's just, I knew this would be a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating film. So I just wanted to share that this really was a major thing that happened in Belgium. I was a child when it happened, but I actually remember hearing about it. I was too young to understand it, but so it did a lot of damage to the country's perception outside of the country too. You talked about it doing a lot of damage internally as well. But I also find that this exploration of evil, as you put it, is so universal. You also said that you're not a conspiracy theorist, and yet these things do come to the fore. Most recently, we heard about the Epstein Island scandal. So do you think that this film really does resonate on a universal level, and also with everything that's been coming to the fore?
I'm not a moralist, and mostly I'm not a politician, so I don't want to dig too much into the real life, because I know shit, you know. I don't know anything. What I know is evil exists. That's for sure. You know, in Belgium, when the Dutroux case happened, it also revealed a very dark aspect of that story, is the social aspect. Because the girls who've been kidnapped, it come from a very difficult background, not poverty, but a very working class people. And, you know, I'm sure if it happened with a very wealthy background, the justice will probably differently. So it revealed a very, very difficult and dangerous social aspect. I don't know about the rest of the world. Of course, you know, scandal, sexual scandal, pedophilia is everywhere. It's a very terrible affliction. But it's not only about pedophilia, it's about the justice, how the justice functions, how cops, as you mentioned, the story happened during the 90s, but during the 90s in Belgium, there is three different forces. The Belgium was not a federal country as it is now. But during the 90s, there is three different cops, police force, and they fight each other. They fight each other for promotion, for political promotion. So they had information. They could have saved the girls. They could have made some positive aspect and get rid of that story quite easily, but they didn't because they want to preserve their information. So it's all the aspect, all the layers of that story is completely insane, and that's why we try to expose in the movie. And it's just like David versus Goliath, you have a young cop, innocent, just like a young boy, full of passion and full of life, who tried to make justice, and he fight like a demon against a massive evil character.
I can't help but reference Serpico in that sense too. I was reminded of that film watching the movie, although there are also noticeable differences between your film and Sidney Lumet's film. So I want to return to the two things that you brought up. So exploration of evil and the quest for justice. And beginning with the exploration of evil, why do you feel you're interested in exploring evil, whether it's evil ingrained in society or just the evil of individuals?
I really don't know. I have a very strong attraction for those kind of stories, especially at the cinema, Cinema brought me so much in life. Cinema learns me everything I know. I learned so much with the different ages. You mentioned Sidney Lumet. Lumet's cinema was so important for me for a long time. I learned so much from Lumet, and I'm just like I learned based on that film. There is another film that's very important. It's a French film. It's called La Femme Flic de Yves Boisset. It's an 80 film. It's very, very terrible film. So I have that kind of attraction. But this time with Maldoror, I tried to build a more global story, not only about my own evil or the evil of my neighbor, or I tried to be a little bit less egocentric. I tried to improve the spectrum of the story. That's why I thought it was time for me to embrace that story and to fight against that. But I have that attraction. I'm not made for make comedy. I would love to make comedy, but I'm not made for that. No, I don't think so.
Gotcha. And about the quest for justice, and kind of this ties into the exploration of evil as well. The protagonist of your movie, this young cop who comes from this background that's very difficult, and he tries to make good out of the evil that he was basically born into. And it's a miracle, really, when you think about it, that somebody would have the strength to do that. But in his obsessive quest for justice in this film, he inevitably ends up hurting a lot of people who are closest to him. So do you view him as a hero, or is it a bit more complex than that?
I think it's a little bit more complex than that, because we talk about evil and good, but of course it's not the binaire movie. There is no white and black. For me, it's gray every time. And especially those days, you have to be that or that or that. We are several things in the same time. You mentioned that about Paul Chartier. Yeah, he has that obsession of justice, but he hurt his wife, he hurts his family, he hurts his baby, he hurts everything because he's so obsessed with his own obsession, with his own quest. And the reflection about evil, I don't know exactly what it is. There is the big evil, that scandal, the fact that we can kidnap young girls for just like we kidnap a bike, or with no moral thought about that, and exploit that just like we exploit a fridge. And then after, the consequence of that are very, very impressive for me. And we think, and we try to prepare that a lot. And that's why also to go back to your first question about the directing, working with the actors, the collaboration with the actors is very important for me because I push them, but they push me, and we try to find the right balance. And I try to adapt what I've written based on the actor's soul and physically, what I can take from him.
So I'd like to also ask you about the filmmaking aspect of the movie then. When you talk about a film that, like we said, is inspired or based on real events and real well-known events, you know, in Belgium, certainly, what's the look of the film that you picture from the beginning? I mean, obviously there's this blend of reality and fiction in the story, but how do you set about bringing it to the screen visually?
Once again, it was a big rupture with my previous work. I tried to make the film just like I was making a documentary, especially at the beginning. You've seen that, but I tried to make the context and the actors very authentic. I was thinking that that subject, that context wouldn't support any faking, trying to make cinema with beautiful traveling and pen and camera work, you know. I thought it was very important for me to stay at hauteur d'homme, at the level of the main character. So I tried to be very modest with my camera, working with the actor. Of course, before that, we made a very, very strong casting work to find the right person, to make it real. I didn't want it to make the audience in position of watching a movie just like you can see sometimes on Netflix, for example, you know, that kind of cheesy, faking, so cinema, you know?
Yeah, like the buddy cop movie based in Los Angeles with all the car chase scenes and all that.
Yes. Once again, it was very modest because I've nothing against anything, especially not Netflix, but I tried to make it authentic. So it was very important for me to have that aspect. So, and suddenly with the time, and because I knew since the beginning the movie will be very long, my producer said, you don't, 2 hours, that's it, 2 hours, that's it. And I said, I don't think so. And during the writing, during the editing, but I knew since the beginning, you know, I need that kind of amplitude, you know, to articulate the story, to make it authentic, to buy the ending, to buy the uchronie, the fact that we reinvent the story at the end for the people who know perfectly well the story, because you're American and you know, the goal was to make something very strong for Belgian audience, but also for the Japanese young boy or teenager or the Korean, just like to have a very neo-noir thriller. But I wanted to have that evolution between authentic to a little bit more impressionist at the end, because we are a little bit more in his head, or Paul Chartier's head.
It is a very powerful film, and I'm so happy we got to talk about it, Fabrice. Thank you very much. But as a final question, seeing as it's also great for me to always talk with somebody who is a cinephile, deviating from your own film, what are you watching recently? What's like your latest cinematic obsession? You talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but is there anything else that you watched recently that blew your mind?
Well, you know, for now I'm in Paris right now, and there is at the Shampoo, you know, on the left bank, the right bank, there is it's a very famous cinema in Paris, and there is a retrospective of Marcel Pagnol.
Wow, I'm not familiar. You caught me.
No, I know it's Marcel Pagnol is a French film director, but a French author. You know, he made a lot of different plays and novels. And it's all film from the 30s, and they've been remastered, and they are beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's incredible, that level of humanity, because it's not only traveling into the past. It's always in travel. It's based, all the story based in Marseille, you know, the other big city in France, and it's full of an amazing, great humanity. And that's why, you know, further I go through cinema experience, making films as a filmmaker or as cinephile, what interests me mostly in cinema is the experience of humanity.
What a great statement. And I think that's the perfect closing statement for our conversation. Thank you very much for joining us and best of luck in Venice.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Well, that does it for tonight's episode. And if you're hungry for more cinematic conversations, you're in luck. Head on over to filmverdictnetwork.com or search for TFV Network on your favorite podcast platform. We've got a treasure trove of audio conversations with fascinating guests, plus some insightful film reviews to keep you company on those long drives or quiet evenings or what have you. Until the next time, from the Film Verdict, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.